That's a great question. First of all, usually people don't ask that question, so thank you for asking it. It's tough. I mean, look, nobody has lived through anything like this.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Smack Hospitality podcast and welcome to my first episode ever as a moderator. My name is Patrizia and for my first Smack episode, I got the chance to talk to my former boss and role model Michelle Walder, GM of the famous NoMad Hotel New York. We talked about how her company dealt with the corona outbreak in the US, how she launched her career in the midst of the last global crisis, and much more. Today's episode is brought to you by Hotel Hero, a company that allows hotels to source and compare software providers. In an ever-growing landscape of software and systems for hotels, Hotel Hero's marketplace website makes it easier for hoteliers to understand and compare offers and source new tech partners. Go check them out at hotelhero.tech, and now enjoy the show. Okay, well, first of all, this is my first podcast with Smack, so you're my first guest. Please be honored.
Congratulations. I'm very honored.
Thank you. And yeah, just welcome to Switzerland, your second home. You've been here for a few days. How has it been?
I have been, yes. It's honestly, I've been in quarantine since Sunday. So it is kind of my second home, but I haven't been able to venture past my balcony. But it looks great from the balcony. So all good here.
Perfect. Well, okay, let's just, for everyone who's listening who doesn't know that we actually know each other, let's just give a bit of context. So Michelle and I met when I was working for Siddell Group in my second internship at the École Hôtelière de Lausanne, where also Michelle went to school. And I work with her at the famous Nomad New York. And yeah, maybe let's just start by you telling us who you are and what you do currently within Siddell.
Sure. Well, yeah, we went to the same school, but obviously I went to school a little bit earlier, not to age myself. But I am currently the general manager of the Nomad New York, and I've been with the company pretty much since the end of 2011. Before that, I graduated from EHL in 2008, to date myself. And I started working for the same company that I did an internship with, my second internship, which was Andre Balazs Properties, and came back to New York to open a hotel in New York. And then, to make a long story short, I ended up with Sydell Group and have loved it ever since.
And how did that came to be? How did you actually end up with Siddell? How did that start?
Honestly, through connections from my second internship. So that same internship that I did with Andre Balazs Properties, which specifically was at this little hotel called the Mercer Hotel in New York City. I had a colleague there named Jake. He was the hotel manager at the time. And it turned out that he started this company with a few other sort of alumni from the Andre Balazs world. Called Sydell Group. And a couple of years later, he had reached out to me and just asked if I wanted to come look at this new project. And that's sort of how it all started. I wasn't expecting to look for a new job, but I absolutely fell in love with the people and the project and the building, obviously. So that's how it started. And he's now a VP world over there. A very small world.
People always say hospitality is like a little mafia. And from what I can tell, that's pretty accurate.
It really is. And that's why I always tell people too, other staff or new people coming into the industry, always end on a good note with anyone, because you never know when you're going to either meet that person again or, just the industry is so small. So you really have to just be good and treat people well.
That's honestly like one of the first things that I remember my dad always telling me, that you always see people twice in your life. And now I'm questioning it, if that's because he's also in hospitality. Maybe that's where he came from. But it's definitely accurate, not only obviously in our industry, just in general in life. But super cool. So it was a bit of a coincidence. But you've been with Siddell like basically since not the start, but like the early years, and
Mhm.
it's been quite some busy years. Like so much has happened in alone to like 2017, the line DC opened, 2018, the line Austin and Nomad Los Angeles, and so much has been happening.
Mhm.
How has your personal experience been through these years? That has the pace changed, or how's that been?
Yeah. Well, it's crazy, first of all, to open that many hotels in such a short amount of time. And when you were with us, I think that was the tail end of
Mhm.
doing a very large amount of openings in a short amount of time. But I would say the pace changed quite drastically probably 3, 4 years in after we opened Nomad New York. So in 2012, we opened Nomad New York. That was the first and only property we had at the time. And in some ways, it was really great because we got to create everything. There were no standards, there were no SOPs or really that much structure in place. So the team at that point was able to build all of that from scratch, which was really fun and exciting. And we were sort of our own little island for a while the development team was very busy with just other projects and developing all around the country and eventually into the UK as well. So we were left alone for a few years. We opened Line LA first in 2014 was our second property, and then Freehand in Miami. And then once that started to happen, so 2, 3 years in, that's when it started to really ramp up. I
Mhm.
think the hospitality world and the real estate world started to pay attention to what Siddell Group was doing. And Nomad New York was very successful. So the pace picked up very quickly from there. But yeah.
So how do you feel about your baby basically being like the mothership of the entire group?
Well, it's really weird to think of it that way because we've, again, like I said, for the first few years, we just did what we knew to do because we were alone in that sense. And corporate was just very busy. So we didn't have a lot of communication with
Guidance.
the corporate
Mhm.
team. Maybe not guidance, they were just really busy doing deals because that's what they do. So it was just a really fun and magical time, and we had an incredible team and just this electric sort of chemistry amongst everyone. John Sutherland is one of them, as you know pretty well, from who's now
Yes.
at Nomad London. But yeah, it's pretty exciting to see, and also through the other hotels, even the other brands, I think it's made us at Nomad New York better
Mhm.
because not only do we have more kind of resources and we have incredible amount of people that now work for us that are, it's a much larger team to be able to go to for advice and ask questions and
Mhm.
also recruit from if we need someone or if we need task force or need help. Suddenly we have this plethora of talent, which is really, really cool and exciting. But also we can get ideas from the other properties. For so long we were alone.
Yeah.
And we had to always look outside of the company for ideas and inspiration or to our guests. We still do that, but now we also can look within the company and see what other properties are doing and how well it works for them, which is really cool and not something that we ever really had the luxury of doing before. So it's
Yeah,
great.
it's so much nicer to get help from within the family.
Exactly. And you
I
don't have to
remember
feel bad about bothering someone or anything. It's just you just pick up the phone and call them and they will give you an answer.
exactly. I remember when I started at the Freehand New York, basically my second month, my GM along came to me and he's like, "So would you be ready to jump on a plane like next week to go to LA and help in task force?" And I was like, "What?"
Yes,
Of course. Oh my God. And I
exactly.
remember I had my suitcase packed for like a week. It was standing me beside my desk and I was just so ready to go and ready to help. And then in the end, I couldn't go.
Oh,
I was so excited, but it just showed me that like I just joined basically the company, and they were just like, like they need help over there, and we have people to send. So yeah, just be ready to leave whenever.
yes, exactly. Which makes it really fun too to work in the company. I think if you're someone that enjoys that type of sort of work travel, it's really, really fun.
For sure, and especially coming from a place like Switzerland, like my first internship, I did it here in Switzerland in a very renowned and like great hotel, but very structured. And
Mhm.
arriving there and just seeing that everything was so different, it was exactly what I wanted. So I was exposed to something completely different, and I loved it. I would have loved to go, but in the end, it didn't work out. But it just showed me that everyone was so ready to help, and we had people come in all the time. Oh, you're from this property, you're from that property. Like, I'm just here on task force or to just meet people,
Yeah.
and that was just that was really interesting to see, and I love
Oh,
that approach.
yeah. No, you fit
um
in perfectly with the company. I wish you could still be there, but anyway, that's a topic for
in
another
the future,
discussion.
in the future.
Yes.
So basically, like you were saying, so much was happening, and I'm sure a lot was planned as well for 2020, before the world decided to change. So can you tell us a bit how, like, what the vision was, in terms of 2020 and the future for Siddell? Because like you were saying, you were going at a massive speed.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. I mean, who would have thought 7 months ago that we would be here right now? Any of us. It's been a really, really crazy roller coaster ride the last few months. Um, so I'll backtrack right before COVID happened. So Q1 of
Mhm.
2020. We were on this really exciting path specifically for Nomad New York. I'll start talking about. We wanted to push ourselves into a little bit of a higher level market. So Nomad
Mhm.
New York has always been this kind of hybrid hotel where we're a boutique hotel, but at the same time we're, especially style wise, we're a little bit more traditional. We have a Michelin star restaurant. It's not necessarily super formal, but it's not also very casual at the same time. And I think identity wise, we've always been sort of sitting in between this 4 to 5 star category. In the States, you don't, ranking hotels by stars is not really something that we do very often. But if
Mhm.
you were to rank us, we'd probably be in the 4.5 to 5 star category, hopefully. But we wanted to really become more of a 5 star for people, not necessarily to take us more seriously, because I think they had, but to be able to elevate that experience for our guests was
Mhm.
probably the ultimate reason that we were doing this. And then, of course, financially as well, to push our average rate up as well was very important to us. I think that's something in the revenue world is the ultimate goal for every hotel. And all
Definitely.
signs were pointing to the ability to do that. And that the market was reacting really well to us, that our guest was reacting really well. So we had some fun kind of creative partnerships that were going and ideas that were coming up. So, for example, additional services at the hotel. So we were about to partner with a helicopter company in New York called
Oh
Blade,
my
which is a really
god.
cool company. Um, and they would essentially kind of transport our guests from the airport directly, not to the hotel, obviously, but to a heliport very close by. Also with our car service company to elevate that experience, to just kind of fully encompass the experience, not just from the moment you walk into our doors,
Yeah.
but also before and after was very important to us. And
Oh my
then,
god, imagine landing next to Flatiron,
oh
next to
my
Madison
gosh,
Park,
that would be really
basically with
cool.
your helicopter. That would be insane, but I'm
Very
sorry.
cool. Yeah. But they're a really interesting company, by the way. They've certainly been hurt a little bit through COVID too. But if anyone ever
Mhm.
wants to take a look at them, they're called Blade. Really interesting concept. But so, we had a lot of fun things going for us. Increasing our services in the hotel. So, for example, the housekeeping service, the turn down service was going to be elevated. We allow guests to really customize their stay a lot more. So, tell us exactly what time you would like service and what kind of service. And you can tell us before you even get here, customize your mini bar, all
Mhm.
kinds of different ways that we could just make the experience a little bit cooler. And we already did, as you probably remember, Pat, we did a lot of this for our very repeat guests because we got to know them
Exactly.
so well. But this was also sort of an initiative to be able to create even more relationships with more guests, which was really exciting. And then COVID started happening and it sort of hit us out of nowhere, to be completely honest. But we had to obviously pull back on a lot of those projects and those initiatives. So I'll go into that as well. But For the company as a whole, we did have to close every hotel temporarily, just due to the health and safety worries that we had, but also from a business perspective, it did not make sense to stay open, unfortunately. It was one of the hardest decisions that I've ever had to make, but also
Mhm.
even more difficult for our CEO and our corporate team, because they are so passionate about everything that they do, but especially the people and the teams. Everyone felt very helpless in the situation,
Yeah.
which was probably the toughest part. But in terms of development, we haven't lost any of the development, the future projects that we are working on. So the two that are certainly on their way, and actually in some ways, I think even sped up throughout this whole process, have been Nomad London. So Nomad
Mhm.
London is our next Nomad, which we're super excited about, that opens in December of this year. Because even though in London, construction was halted for a while and there were mass quarantines throughout the city, construction, the same thing happened in New York, was one of the first industries to be allowed to
Yeah.
come back to work. So they were able to really make a lot of progress in a short amount of time because there was no other distraction around, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. So
For
they are
sure.
doing really well. And then apart from that, the second project that is next in line is the Line Hotel in San Francisco, which is also making a lot of progress and we are very, very excited about. And then we have some other projects that are still on in the pipeline, but I'm not quite allowed to talk about them, but
Yeah.
they are, I'm sure you know some of them.
Exactly.
Um,
Let's just say there's a lot coming.
yes, very exciting on both European and North American continents. So it's very exciting.
Well, I'm just very happy to hear that it didn't ruin the entire growth and expansion plan, and just put it a bit on hold. And yeah, like everyone who is in either Germany or Switzerland or wherever you're listening from, London Nomad opening in December. It's a beautiful hotel. It's right on the opposite road, on the road of the Opera and the Floral Street, and it's going to be amazing. So go check it
Yes.
out. It's not as far as New
Yes.
York.
Thank you.
And
Yes, please do.
and so I don't want to spend too much time on the crisis because we all like live through it every day and it's getting annoying. But just in terms of a for I think in terms of a hotel perspective, it's still very interesting because you were saying, I mean, most of the hotels had to shut down at some point in every country and basically
Mhm.
to reopen. And I'm just very interested in like how did you come to the decision? I mean, yes, closing it business wise, I think most understand that why that had to happen, but in terms of reopening, I mean, you have properties all over the states, very different. I mean, New York was horrible for a very long time, but then you have properties in Austin and in LA and in on the West Coast. So it's just how
Mhm.
did you just decide when to open which one back up? How much responsibilities were with the people on site? How much was corporate? Maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Sure. That's a great question, first of all. Usually people don't ask that question, so thank you for asking it. But it's tough. I mean, look, nobody has lived through anything like this. So I think even
Mhm.
for a corporate team, it was difficult all around to decide to close and when to reopen. So I think each property we learned every single time that we reopened one, and then those lessons were passed on to the next property. Um, and also each property is slightly different because some of them have different owners, right? They have different
Mhm.
investors, and sometimes you're kind of tethered to what those companies would like to do, and also the loan programs that the government put out, all of that. So there were many different elements involved in having to reopen, but ultimately the most important factor for all of the Siddell properties was the health and safety of the staff and the employees. So we really very much paid attention to the health numbers and the COVID positivity rates in those areas.
Mhm.
So for example, as you mentioned, Austin, Texas was the first one to reopen.
Mhm.
And the reason for that is because their numbers actually weren't as bad at the beginning when this happened, probably in April, May is when they shut down. They were one of the latest to close and one of the first to reopen. And that is also because we saw a bigger demand come in through there. So we felt like the business could potentially be there if we did reopen. And their numbers, their COVID numbers, positivity rates were trending downwards at the time, is the key point. So they reopened the first week of June, I believe it was, and incredibly successful opening. They did so well. They obviously added a ton of health and safety procedures and protocols. The interesting part is, even though all these properties right now are in the United States, except for the Ned, every guest in terms of the culture and the area that they were in responded very differently to all of our protocols, which was, I guess, not too surprising if you think about the areas such as Texas, for example. So we did get there a little bit more pushback for, if the staff was wearing or would ask a guest to put their mask on when they were walking around indoors. There was a bit more pushback than there is in New York now, for example. It could also have to do with the timing. So Texas actually, after we reopened, got worse, not better, in terms of the numbers, which was a little bit scary. And luckily we kept our doors open. We did have to revert back in food and beverage. So for example, we had to reclose the bar, and we just shifted sort of seats and things around into other areas of the hotel. Luckily, it's a very large property. But so that was probably our first reopening, and they've been doing pretty well. They actually have a higher average rate than they did last year at the same time, which is really interesting. But their guest is very different from Nomad New York, for example. The second property was the Saguaro Hotel in Palm Springs, California. So that's in Southern California in the desert. They are, it's true. They're much smaller, and they were the second property to reopen almost a week after the Austin property did. And similar to what Austin experienced, they had a bit of pushback from guests. So while we thought we were doing everything well to keep guests protected and keep them safe and healthy, some people I think it was that COVID fatigue was setting in very quickly there.
Definitely.
And it's a really tricky line, because you want to obviously welcome guests back. You need the revenue. And it's in our DNA to do that. But on the flip side, we also have to protect not only our staff, but also our other guests. So it was definitely a learning curve. But they also did, interestingly, very, very well. And I think it goes to show that those two properties, even though Austin is considered a city, but Palm Springs in particular is a little bit more of a destination location. So they were doing really well, also better than last year. So I don't know if that's answering your questions as to why we reopened or not, but I think at the time we really focused just on the COVID numbers and see when it would be safe to reopen. And then, of course, same thing happened in California. Their numbers actually got worse in certain areas. So we just watched and observed very closely. And we just sort of made decisions as we went along and saw fit. But for both Austin and Palm Springs, neither of them have really had to pull back too much. Austin, the only thing that they had to do was shift around their food and beverage offering a little bit because of the city ordinances.
I mean, I think it's what you just said. I think it's a thin line. I've been talking to like restaurants and bars here in Zurich and hotels, of course, that reopened, and they all said like it's hard because you want to welcome everyone back with open arms, but you need to make sure that also you don't get fined or that you don't have a problem as a business, right? So it's a balancing act, which is hard to follow when you just want to like hug everyone and just welcome everyone in that you can. But I think we just all need to stay flexible, and as far as I know, Siddell Properties and the staff and the teams, it's probably more seen as a nice challenge to like shift stuff around and figure something out, and that's great to hear. And also I think people are just ready to travel again. That's also why I've said from the beginning, as long as people adapt to the new standards and to the new rules that just now exist in our world, then people will travel again, and because they miss it. And so I'm not surprised that, for example, a saguaro is having traction because people just want to get away.
Exactly. And we see that. So while we may not see the demand in urban areas right now in cities, which is a little scary for people like me that manage a city property, but we are
Hmm.
seeing it on the flip side. I have friends in the industry too. My sister even runs kind of a beach resort type of a thing.
Hmm.
They've had a better summer that they've ever had in the last 20 years. So it just goes to show you that when people do have the chance to go out there, not only do they want to travel, but they want to spend, they want to splurge. I think there's a little bit of this carpe diem,
Hmm.
now we can enjoy our time together because we haven't been able to for so long.
Yeah.
So they are, splurging. But the dangerous part is that as you said, is when they start to let their guard down, which oftentimes happens in a hotel or restaurant. As soon as you have any alcohol involved and friends seeing each other, people get a little bit looser. So it's a really tricky thing. And, I tell my team all the time, it's not our job to police people, but at the same time, if someone doesn't want to follow the rules, then unfortunately they're not welcome. The most important thing is everybody's safety right now.
Yeah, and
So
I think most people would understand that. Maybe not in the moment, but afterwards, with a bit less alcohol in their blood.
exactly. Yeah. But so back to your question in terms of when we chose to reopen, I think those two properties we learned a lot from. The other properties after that are a bit more city properties. So it was Washington, D.C., the Ned in London, and then we were the next one after that in September.
Hmm.
And for those properties, it was not only health and safety related, but also revenue related and kind of looking at what the market was doing. And then lastly, it was, this part doesn't really make any financial sense necessarily, but I think part of it has to do with staying relevant. At some point, you have to reopen your
Yeah,
doors. You have to make sure that people remember who you are. And for us in particular with Nomad London, that was happening whether we wanted it to happen or not. Obviously, we wanted it to, but I think New York was so important for that opening to be able
hmm,
to drive business into London as well,
for sure.
was massively important. So, yeah, that's sort of how we made those decisions. Were they the right ones or
Yeah.
not? We won't really know for a
And
while.
that's the thing. At some point, you just need to decide to move on because,
Yeah,
like, everyone just and there's no wrong and right, I think, and no one, or like only in 10 years will know if it was the right decision. But I think it's better to do something than just wait and wait and wait. And like you said, it's
correct.
also about staying relevant and showing people that you are here for them. You're
Yep.
showing up.
Yeah, for your
Um,
community and the staff as well.
exactly. Yeah, and that for sure as well. So I would like to change gears a little bit and talk a bit more about you as a person. You might not know this, but I have told the story to like all of my friends. For the longest time, I always said, "Oh, I never want to be a GM." I've never seen that in my life. Like my dad has been a GM a couple of times, and obviously I've met GMs in my earlier internships, and I've always said I don't think that's actually what I want to do or what I could do. And until I worked for you, and I know it's only been like 1.5 months and stuff, but I remember thinking, okay, if I can be a GM like her, then I think it would be a lot of fun because honestly,
Oh,
it. I mean, a lot of you guys don't know Michelle, but like, it's crazy with how much warmth and empathy and presence you lead your team, and so you were really inspiring to me back then. And now I wouldn't say no to a GM position probably because I know now that what it can be.
oh.
So thank you for showing me that.
No, thank you for telling me that. I had no idea. And yeah, we can chat offline afterwards to make sure that's what you want to do. But yeah,
so,
I'm glad that changed your mind a little bit.
so my question is, have you always wanted to become a GM, or how has that been for you? Like, did you kind of fall into it, or?
Yeah, like many people in our industry, I feel like I fell into it to be totally, completely transparent and honest. I grew up similar to you in a sort of hotel family, not entirely the same. My parents had day jobs, but on the side, they had a hotel as well.
How did you do
All,
that?
it's crazy. They had a big staff, but that staff included my sister and I. So we were working in that hotel kind of after school and restaurant. after school and on weekends and during our vacations. And similarly to you, from what it sounds like, I was a bit turned off by the industry. I think growing up, everyone sort of made the assumption that I would end up in hospitality. My sister as well, she's 10 years older than I am, and she went full on into the industry. She wanted to be a GM. She made that very clear from a young age on, and she's very successful. Whereas for me, I think I hesitated a bit more, and I had a separate interest, which I still do, that I dabbled in a little bit before I decided to go to school for hospitality, which was architecture and design. And
well, I mean, Siddell is a good, at least a good hotel company in that sense.
exactly, yeah. But at the time, all I knew were very sort of traditional, a bit more old-fashioned type of properties and very sort of stiff and formal style of service. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just didn't feel like that was an environment that I wanted to be in on a daily basis. And I felt as though I would regret not trying at least to look into the design and architectural world. So initially, when I graduated high school, I did go to architecture school and design school and tried that for probably about 6 months. And at the same time, this was in London, at the same time I was working during the day, sorry, at night, not during the day, I was going to class during the day. And I was working at night for a hotel called the Sanderson in London, which was an Ian Schrager property, designed by Philippe Starck. This is the early 2000s when that was very cool and hip. And I just absolutely fell in love. And I felt like it was that experience with Ian Schrager and being in that kind of environment that just clicked in my head. And I said, you know what? I've been fighting this one part of me for so long that knows that I could do this if I wanted to. But if I could merge it with my two passions, which was the other side was architecture and design, and I felt so inspired by Ian Schrager and Philippe Starck at the time, that if I could merge those two, then I'd be in a really happy place. And that is sort of what shifted in my head a bit. And I decided to go full time into hospitality. I didn't necessarily ever dream of being a general manager. I think I saw a couple things in my way. I think one, I didn't really see anyone that I could or that I wanted to aspire to be in the sense of what their lifestyle was like. I saw a lot of people in the industry that worked really, really long hours, that worked very hard, that had really fun jobs, but they couldn't really balance that out with a good personal life either. I frankly didn't see a lot of women as general managers either, so I didn't even think that
Definitely
was necessarily something that could even be done. And yeah, so I just sort of felt like, all right, maybe I'll be in, operations somehow, but as long as I can also be in development and help create things, I think that was the most important part for me. When I was studying design and architecture, part of the reason why I shifted so quickly was, although I was inspired by it, it took forever for anything to
actually
get
make
done.
something happen.
Yeah, it takes years sometimes for an architect to see a building even start to take shape, And I think one part, if anybody knows me well, is I get really impatient and I like to get things done quickly. And I love that immediate sense of satisfaction in the hospitality world that you get when you can just fix something for someone or get something done or make them happy or even just open the door for someone. I know that sounds so simple and so basic, but for me, I love that sense of being able to help and do that. Yeah, that was sort of
I
why
completely
I decided to do this.
The direct impact and feedback, I think that's something that you just miss in any other job, because even if you deal with clients on like a regular job, I think it's just not the same. How I don't know the feedback and like the smile when you get, when, like you said, holding a door or like picking something up for someone and just delivering it. It's just, I don't know, it's a weird, that's why people call us weird, hospitality people are weird.
For sure. But I learned that even more during COVID, actually, because that part was taken away from so many of us because we had to close, right? And even if you work in the back of house, everyone that works in this industry has that in their DNA, or at least they should. And if they don't, maybe there's a different issue. But the fact that that ability to serve was taken away so abruptly and so quickly, it was really difficult for some people. Even for myself, it was almost depressing in a way. And then as soon as we started bringing people back, so one thing we did also while Nomad New York was closed, we did World Central Kitchen. We were cooking for a charity, and we brought some of the kitchen team in for that, and they were making very, very little money, much less than what they were used to, barely the same amount to what they would be making on unemployment from the state. But just by putting them back in the kitchen and putting them in an active service, you could see their mentality and their happiness just change. It gave them purpose again. And it may not have been serving a Michelin star meal to someone paying $1,000. These were free meals for frontline medical workers and the homeless. But regardless, that sort of light came back on inside of them. And that was really, really cool to see.
And it arguably gives you even more purpose if you can do something like that in a crisis like we were facing. I think the whole just image of you serving someone and making someone a bit happier, make their life a bit easier for once. That's completely understandable that they would come back for that. So that was a great project. But yeah, I think that's what has been missing for a lot of us, and what drives us in the end. I think what keeps us in an industry where pay isn't that great and hours are very long. So
Exactly.
you need to be a little bit mad to go into this. I mean, my mom never understood. She literally told me, why would you do this? You saw your dad. And I was like, yeah, my dad's very happy. So if I'm going to be very happy by 55, then I think I'm good.
Exactly. Yeah.
So another thing, which I'm sure, because you're super humble, you never talk about, but this woman, Michelle, won the first Women in Leadership Award handed out by EHL, by our university, last year. So congrats on that. I know it's been a year, but still. And tell me a bit about that. How did that happen? Were you nominated? Did you nominate yourself? How did that work?
No, I had no idea. I also didn't realize that I was the first woman that was awarded, which is also crazy. It's not like I was the first woman to go to school there.
No.
But I'm very thankful that EHL is finally, just awarding women and showing a little bit of attention to those of us that are maybe not recognized as much. So it was really, really cool. But I honestly didn't know about it until one of my friends sent me a what do you call it? A snapshot on their phone of the questionnaire that was sent out, I guess, to all the alumni. And I was super confused, but I'm like, oh, that's cool. Whatever. Didn't really think anything of it. And then they told me that I won it. So that was really, really humbling and very thoughtful of them and very sweet.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's a great initiative that across school, a few professors have actually started this initiative, Women in Leadership, and it has effects in courses, in speakers that they invite, and like in the alumni network with this award. So I think it's a great thing. And when I saw your picture, of course, I freaked out. It was really, really emotional for us. But yeah, congrats on that again.
Thank you.
So do you think sometimes it was harder for you to get where you wanted to go in the industry, or on the contrary, do you think sometimes it helped you being a woman?
It's a great question. To be honest, I think I never really was someone that had a very specific trajectory. Like I mentioned before, I didn't really plan on being a GM. In fact, I didn't even really apply for this role. They very nicely gave it to me, but it wasn't something that I had actively, was driven to be a GM. So I think it was part of it was just luck and being in the right place at the right time. I think that now, even versus 10 years ago, women are being shown a little bit more appreciation in certain environments. And I'm not saying, I'm not all for the Me Too movement. I think it was a very powerful thing and a very important thing to have happen in the world's culture. But at the same time, I'm a big believer in balance in all ways, not just in feminine and masculine and everything in between. But I think that balance is so important on any team, especially in hotels or restaurants or any kind of business, in order to really be able to progress and move forward. I don't think necessarily being a woman helped me get further in the industry. I do think that in some situations I could see that naturally I was able to handle situations differently than most of my colleagues, which were men. And don't get me wrong, I love all of them. But there were situations where I could tell that my reaction was different than most of theirs. And that for that, I'm actually very thankful for it, because I do think that helped me keep a very calm, even keeled way of thinking about certain things. I think women just think slightly differently sometimes than men do. And not that it's good or bad, it's just different. But I think the one positive in hospitality is, we do lead with empathy. I think we do think, not everyone, I'm totally generalizing, but I do believe that women sometimes think a little bit more about the community that they're in and long-term growth rather than the immediate future and immediate gain of what is right in front of them. And you can see that in all different kinds of industries. There's lots of studies about this and science out there. Look at the microfinance model in underdeveloped countries, where they give women small loans rather than men for that exact reason, is because it normally, that $1, that one franc that you give to a woman is more likely to grow and to develop their family and to pay for education, for example, rather than if they give it to a man. So it's, again, just a really interesting thing. But back to your question. Sorry.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I don't think, me being a woman changed any part of me being able to have this job. I'm very thankful for it. I'm in a very open company that was able to give me this opportunity. I think that if I was in a more traditional type of company, I don't think I would necessarily be where I am, to be totally frank. So
I think what you said is very important in terms of it's good to have different mindsets and different thinking people at one table. So that doesn't matter if it's women or men or whatever, but it just adds to the conversation, to the decision making process if you're coming from different sides. So I think that's the most
100%.
important thing. But yeah, it's just
how you grow.
Exactly. How you push each other to become the best version of the team that you are.
Yep. And it would be boring otherwise. So
Exactly. So you graduated from EHL, like you said, in 2008, which was also a bit of a global crisis going on there. And you still scored an incredible opportunity with the Standard Highline, which is one of the most amazing hotels in New York, of course, after the Nomad New York. Right after 6 months, I think you were already promoted. So that's incredible. So as a recent graduate myself, and with all of my friends looking for jobs at the moment, what's your advice to us or to the next year's graduates, because it's going to be still hard times in a few months?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't envy graduates right now. I can't even begin to imagine how difficult it must be to look at the future. 2008, I was very lucky. I feel as though, some economists might disagree with me, but I feel like it was not as bad as what we're facing right now, especially for our industry in tourism. But what we do see now more and more is people that are adaptable and flexible and willing to work hard and willing to kind of just jump in and figure things out are the ones that are being the most successful in this type of an environment, right? Because hotels and restaurants, everyone is working with such a slim team that we literally are doing so many more people's jobs in your role, that if you're not adaptable and you have an attitude of that's not my job, that's not what I'm paid to do, or that's not what I was taught to do, then unfortunately there's not a lot of time for that type of attitude, and you're not going to get very far. So I do think that this is a time to be very open, to be very flexible, and to be willing to roll your sleeves up and work really hard. On the flip side, I think it should also open people's eyes to other industries that maybe they didn't even consider before. And I think that's a positive thing. I think that, hospitality students and people with that crazy little DNA that we talked about before that like to serve others, there's a lot of room for that in other industries, especially now, I think more than ever. So I think that hospitality students should open their eyes to what else is out there. In the immediate future, if you need a job, I would say look at resort destination type of places. It might be the mountains. It might be, warmer weather areas where people can go and have, be outside and safely have a distance to one another. Cities, unfortunately, are going to take, I would say, a little longer to come back.
I think it's very interesting that you say that people should be open to other industries, because that's what made me what saddened me the most about us graduating into this time, because already from our school 50% of graduates never even work in traditional hospitality after graduation. And of course now, I mean, even myself, I work at a food tech startup, which is very early stage and super cool, and I learn a lot, but I wanted to stay in hospitality. So a lot of us are also driven out of the industry at the moment that actually wanted to stay, and that made me even more sad, because I for example, me, I wanted to stay, and now I have to dabble in something else for a bit to hopefully soon come back to it. But but I mean, it's what you said before. It's being flexible, being open, and just being ready to learn. And I think that's one lesson that especially my generation had also to learn a bit. I mean, we had a great time on this earth. Nothing ever happened to us. We can't really remember the last crisis. And I think it's important as well to understand that we've been very lucky, and it's just not normal that you graduate and everyone's just waiting for you. So a little bit of struggle is okay.
It's true. Honestly, it's going to make you stronger in the long
Exactly.
run.
Exactly. So I think it's true what you said. Just be flexible, be open, and that's what I can see with most of my friends as well. It's just that you put yourself in an environment where you can learn, where you can grow, and in the end, it doesn't really matter if it now is for that one company that you've always wanted to work for. It will figure itself out slowly but surely.
For sure. Yeah. And everything that you're going to learn in these other industries that you might not want to be in, you can apply in hospitality later down the line. Hospitality will come back 100%. It's in
It will
human
always
nature that we want to travel. And like you've personally been in many different departments. There's all different kinds of resources and knowledge that you have to have. So all of it is going to be useful in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, great. Well, I have one last thing for you to end on a very positive note. Do you have one example from the last few months, one situation that just reminded you that everything's going to be okay, or just reminded you of why you love being in this industry so much? Can you think of, I don't know, an incident or a conversation you had, or just
Oh
something that made
man.
you very happy?
Um, one thing does stand out. I mean, there's a lot of things that I've been lucky enough to witness that have made me happy. It's definitely been an emotional roller coaster. But one thing that I have to say I'm really thankful that my company has done, Siddell Group specifically, is during the closures, when most of us were closed, all of us were closed actually, the corporate team and all the GMs that were kind of left, we took a diversity class which was really, really interesting. So I don't know about Europe as much, but in the United States, alongside COVID, there was a little bit of civil unrest that was happening throughout the country. And I think it's something that needed to happen for a long time. Specifically, the kind of Black Lives Matter initiative has brought up a lot of pain and just a lot of, I guess, unrest all over the country. And this class that we took was super interesting because of those of us that were in it. So it was literally, our CEO was in the class, my boss was in the class, my coworkers were in the class. And we were talking about really kind of scary topics and uncomfortable topics that you don't necessarily talk about on a day-to-day basis, like just chit-chatting at the coffee station. And it was really, really insightful and made me excited about the future because I realized how open my company was becoming, even just taking this one course, how it changed their view of how they're going to hire moving forward and the type of structures that we have and the learning opportunities. And that just made me really excited. So it was sort of, even though it was a sad time, especially in America, that was one positive that I think came out of it. And that I know other people or other companies did very similar things, but it was a really interesting opportunity for us to sort of sit back and listen, and really learn and see what actions we can take to make things better.
Yeah,
So
and come together.
That was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I have goosebumps.
Aw.
Well, that was an amazing last topic for this
Cool.
podcast. Well, thank you so much for taking the time.
Of course,
It
thank
was
you.
great to have you. And enjoy your time in Switzerland.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll see each other soon in person.
Yes, a little outdoor apéro once I'm out of quarantine would be fantastic.
That's it for this episode, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Special thanks to our season sponsor, I Reckon You, hospitality's first customer data platform. Their philosophy is to stop buying software and building a framework. Their middleware platform connects a hotel's above property and on-premise systems, creating a frictionless flow of hotel and guest data that enhances the guest journey while increasing operational efficiency. Find out more at ireckonyou.com, and don't forget to check out what there is to know about Smack at smack.media or on our YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook channel. We'll see you next time.